Hey, today we're continuing our series called Along the Road. We're talking about the roads throughout the Bible and the roads that we walk on. And as we look at these roads that these people, these biblical characters walked on, and we see how God taught them along the roads that they walked, we look and see how is God teaching me along the roads that I am walking as well. And today is one of the strangest roads in the entire Bible. And you may have heard this. It's a pretty obscure story. You may have heard it before. But it is the road. We're going to be talking about the road of temptation and the temptation to leave the road of God. Okay, the temptation to take our own path, not to walk the path of God. And we have that temptation, whether we realize it or not. We have that temptation all the time in our lives. And in fact, every day we have an opportunity to go and to step off the road that God is leading us on and to go somewhere else. And so today we're going to be talking about that. It's in Numbers chapter 22. If you have the app, you can pull up the app. You can pull out the notes so you can type in a few blanks as we go if you'd like to follow along that way. And as usual, if you are new with us here in this room or watching us online, there's a communication card on the app. We'd love for you to go fill that out. Let us know that you are here. Let us know that you are with us, how we can serve you, how we can help you, how we can pray for you. That's all done through the app or through the website, and you can go and get those there. Okay, so where we find ourselves in the story of the Bible in Numbers 22 is the Israelites have come up out of Egypt, like we talked about last week, and they've come up on the east side of the Dead Sea. Let me show you this little map of Israel here. There is, so Egypt is down to the southwest, down to the left, the bottom left. So they've come up on the right side of the Dead Sea, the east side of the Dead Sea, and they've kind of circled around, and we're going to read here in just a minute that they've camped in the land of Moab by the Jordan River across from Jericho. So you see the Dead Sea, you see the Jordan River coming up out of, it flows down into the Dead Sea, but on the map it looks like it's coming out. So yeah, it flows down into the Dead Sea. So the Jordan River's right there. You see Jericho on the left. So right across the Jordan River is where this happens, what we're going to read today. Numbers 22, the Israelites traveled on and camped in the plains of Moab near the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, son of Zippor, this guy was king of Moab. So that whole area, he is the king of Moab. He saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. They had kind of wiped them out. Moab was terrified of the people because they were numerous, and Moab dreaded the Israelites. Verse 5, so Balak sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, at Pethor, which is by the Euphrates in the land of his people. Okay, so all you need to know about this is that it's not close. Okay, the Euphrates River, if you're looking at that map again, way up far to the northeast is the Euphrates River. Depends on where you are on the river, but it was 200 to 300 miles. Okay, on foot or on donkey or on, however you're getting there, it takes a long time. So Balak, the king of Moab, sends messengers to this guy named Balaam. Balak said to him, look, a people has come out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land and are living right across from me. Please come and put a curse on these people for me, because they're more powerful than I am. And I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed. So a few questions here. Who's this Balaam guy? Okay, who is he? It seems like he is a prophet of God, and we're going to see here in a minute that he is an actual prophet of God, but he's not an Israelite. But he's an evil guy, because we're going to see that too. He's got some wickedness in him. But he's not a false prophet, because what he prophesies actually comes true. So he's a true prophet of God, but at the same time he's got this wicked bent. But there's some unanswered questions that we don't have answers to. How does the king of Moab, Balak, know about this guy Balaam who lives 200 to 300 miles away? How does he even know about him? How does he, why does Balaam have all this notoriety in the land? And has he blessed people and cursed people before? And so that's legendary, and Balak knows this or whatever. So these are all questions that we don't really know. Regardless, we need to just point out that King Balak is making a grave error here by asking Balaam to curse God's people. Okay? That's just not going to end well for Balak. Okay, if you go all the way back to Abraham in Genesis 12, God meets with Abram, which was his name at the time, and he's leading him to the land he's promising. In Genesis 12, God says to Abram, I'll make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I'll make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So for Balak to come and try to curse God's people is not going to work well for him. It's just kind of ridiculous that God would use one of his own prophets to curse his own people, but Balak's going to take the chance, okay? So Balak sends some guys up the road, on this road up to Balaam, and he asks them to curse the Israelites, okay? They bring this fee. This is what's called a diviner's fee. It's a fee that they would pay prophets for prophecy, okay? So they bring this fee with them, and they say, hey, would you come curse these people here for us? Balaam hears their request, and he says, instead of saying, y'all, no, these are God's people, just go home, he says, why don't you stay here tonight, and I'll check with God. That's his first mistake. Okay, and that we begin to see already into Balaam's heart just a little bit. That night, Balaam goes to meet with God. Numbers 22, verse 9. God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you, Balaam? In other words, what are you doing, Balaam? Why are these guys who are enemies of God's people, clearly, they've already said that, why are they even in your house? Balaam should have known right away what God's answer was going to be. God was not going to say, yes, you can go curse my people. But Balaam just opened the door a little bit. Okay, here's principle number one. Ready? Temptation begins when you invite ungodliness in. When you open the door even just a little bit, that's when temptation begins. Do you feel like you are constantly struggling with different types of temptation? And this can look many, many different ways. It could be a sin that you keep going back to. It could be just temptation to step off the narrow way. It could be multiple things. It could be a temptation to doubt or a temptation to being faithless. But whatever it is, and you may not even realize that you're putting yourself in situations that you're destined to fail. Okay, we know that an alcoholic shouldn't go to a bar, right? A gambler shouldn't go to a casino. A porn addict shouldn't have a computer that's unfiltered. We know these things. You should not put yourself in situations where you are going to fail. So what's your temptation? Run from it. Stay away from it. Certainly don't let it stay the night at your house. Don't open the door. Do what it takes to keep your home secure before the temptation arrives. That's how you fend that temptation off before it even gets here. And that is absolutely not what Balaam did. Balaam, we're going to find out as we go through the story, as we kind of finish at the end, we're going to see that Balaam was all about the cheddar. Okay, he wanted this huge payday, and he was tempted that way. Verse 12. Then God said to Balaam, you are not to go with them. You are not to curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam got up the next morning and said to Balak's officials, go back to your land because the Lord has refused to let me go with you. Okay, now I want you to catch what Balaam's communicating here. He's essentially saying, if it were up to me, I'd go with you, but God said no. If it were up to me, I'd go with you, but God says no. So they go back and they tell Balak the king, and Balak tries again. He sends a bigger group of people with like more status, like a bigger entourage, more money, makes a bigger offer. Verse 18, Balaam responded to the servants of Balak, if Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go against the command of the Lord my God to do anything small or great. But please stay here overnight as the others did so that I may find out what the Lord has to tell me. You see what he's doing, right? He's keeping the door open like there may be a price that he could be bought for. And the servants of Balak have to be thinking, so what you're saying is there's a chance, right? So what you're saying is there's a chance. Again, there's no point of asking these guys to stay. Balaam knows the right thing to do, but he keeps inviting ungodliness into his house. Balaam is like this little kid who asks his dad for something. Daddy, may I have this? And dad says, no. And the kid keeps coming, Daddy, now may I have this? No. Daddy, may I now have, and no. That's what Balaam is like here. And God comes to Balaam that night and said to him, since these men have come to summon you, get up and go with them. But you must only do what I tell you. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand this. God did not change his mind. Balaam's evil-hearted begging is going to need to be dealt with. And God says, fine, go your own way. Let's just see how that works out for you. Here's principle 2, ready? God allows us to follow our own road, but then uses it to teach us. God doesn't waste our experiences. Okay, whether we create these experiences in our lives with sin or what, he doesn't waste them. He gives us the free will, and sometimes what we learn and out of this comes down here, down the road. Sometimes we learn it right away. But he's always going to use what we go through to teach us something, right? Teach us something about ourselves, something about him, something about life. He's going to use it to teach something. We just have to listen. We have to learn, okay, as he teaches us. Balaam had to be just a little bit excited here that God said, okay, you can go. He had to be like, oh, okay, let's go. But he had no idea what was ahead, okay, what God had planned for him. It gets a little funky here in verse 21. When he got up in the morning, Balaam saddled his donkey and went with the officials of Moab. But God was incensed that Balaam was going. You never want God to be incensed at you, correct? And God was incensed that Balaam was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand on the path to oppose him. And Balaam was riding his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. Okay, so yes, God gave Balaam permission to go, not because it was the right thing to do, but because he was allowing Balaam to choose his path. Okay, but it angered God that Balaam's heart was so wicked, so the angel of the Lord comes to oppose him on the path. I want to point something out to you. When you read in the Old Testament about the angel of the Lord, that's different than when you read in the Old Testament about an angel. An angel of the Lord, and as you trace this through, and this is a whole other sermon series probably, but as you trace through the instances where the angel of the Lord is presented, that is, what they're saying is that is the presence of God himself. Okay? And we're going to see here in just a minute that this angel of the Lord is worshipped. And anywhere where there is an angel, a regular angel, and a human tries to worship, that angel goes, no, I'm just an angel. You don't worship me. But here, where the angel of the Lord is, he's okay being worshipped because he is the Lord. So it's a human occurrence of the divine. We've talked in other ways about maybe that's a Christophany. We've talked about the occurrence of Jesus because God in human form is Christ, right? So there's lots of ways that this could look, but I want you to see that this is the angel of the Lord, which is God in human form. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing on the path with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the path and went into the field. And so Balaam hid her to return to the path. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards with a stone wall on either side. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord and pressed herself against the wall, squeezing Balaam's foot against it. So he hit her once again. Then the angel of the Lord went ahead. What is the angel of the Lord doing? Trying to get Balaam to see his error. And Balaam keeps saying, no, I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to do my own thing. The angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn to the right or the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam, and so he became furious and beat the donkey with his stick. One thing here I want to point out. The donkey is more spiritually perceptive than Balaam, who is God's prophet. That should tell you a little bit about where Balaam's heart is, right? His heart has grown cold and callous, and that's principle 3. When we walk off God's road, our heart can become callous to his voice. When we start going our own way and start ignoring the voice of God gets quieter because our heart becomes callous, our heart becomes hardened to him. When we continue to make ungodly choices, that hardens your heart. You want to hear God's voice in your life? It begins by walking on his path, by refusing to allow temptation to pull you off, by staying close to his word, by being in fellowship with other believers, by keeping the prayer line open with God continually. That's how you keep your heart soft and able to hear his voice. So watch what God does to get Balaam's attention. Verse 28. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she asked Balaam, "What have I done to you that you've beaten me these 3 times?" Hold on. A talking donkey. Like this one? That's what I'm visualizing. How about you? I don't know, Shrek. What have I done to you too? You know, that's kind of what it feels like here. All right. Was that good? Thanks. I've been watching Shrek all weekend just to get that down. All right. So how did that happen? How did the donkey open his mouth and talk? Well, God did it. Okay, God can do anything he wants. But it does get a little weirder here. And this might be something you just skip over when you're reading this, but I wanted to point out these next 4 words. Verse 29. Balaam answered the donkey. Okay, so not only is the donkey talking to him, he's okay with it. It doesn't say Balaam stopped and thought, why is my donkey talking to me? He just answers him. Balaam answered the donkey. You made me look like a fool. If I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you right now. But the donkey said, am I not the donkey you've ridden all your life until today? Have I ever treated you this way before? No, he replied. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the path with a drawn sword in his hand. And Balaam responds appropriately, knelt low and bowed in worship on his face. If this was just a regular angel, he would not have allowed that. He would say, do not worship me, worship God. But this is the angel of the Lord, and he receives his worship. And the angel of the Lord asked him, why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Look, I come out to oppose you because I consider what you're doing to be evil. The donkey saw me, turned away from me these 3 times. If she'd not turned away from me, I would have killed you by now and let her live. But Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I didn't know that you were standing in the path to confront me. And now if it's evil in your sight, I'll go back. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go on with these men, but you're to say only what I'll tell you, because now he's going to use them. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. Here's principle 4. God can even speak through donkeys. Are there people in your life that sometimes you feel like are donkeys? Or the King James Version of donkey? God can speak in so many different ways in people that we are unexpected to hear from, huh? Sometimes I think we feel like God can only speak in like thunder and lightning, and we wait for this massive occurrence or something. And we think that that's the only way that God speaks, or is in these grand, huge ways, or this piece all has to line up, and then it's the voice of God. And God does speak in major ways, of course. But sometimes he just whispers to you, right? Sometimes he speaks through his word. You're just reading by yourself in the morning, one morning, you're like, oh, right? Sometimes he speaks in experiences we have. Sometimes he speaks to you just by you communing, just talking with him, through prayer, through the church and what happens here, through other people, even people that we wouldn't expect God to speak through. You never know how you might hear the voice of God, and that's why you have to always keep your heart pure and your ears open and your heart soft. That's how you defeat the temptation of taking your own way and staying on the path of God on God's road. Okay, so Balaam ends up arriving at Balak's camp, okay? And Balak takes him out and shows him the Israelites' camp, takes him to a big hill, shows him where the Israelites are camped. And remember, we talked last week, it's probably a couple million people. So it's a huge amount of people. And Balaam reminds Balak that he can only say what God tells him to say. Numbers 23, verse 1, then Balaam said to Balak, go build me 7 altars here and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me. So Balak did as Balaam directed, and they offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Balaam said to Balak, stay here by your burnt offering while I'm gone. Maybe the Lord will meet with me, and I'll tell you whatever he reveals to me. So he went off to a barren hill. So then God gives Balaam a message to speak over the Israelites, but it's not a message of curse. It's a message of blessing. And it talks all about how the Israelites are going to be blessed and what they're going to do to the surrounding people, including Balak's people. And Balak is like, what have you done to me, verse 11? I brought you to curse my enemies, but look, you've only blessed them. And Balaam answered, shouldn't I say exactly what the Lord puts in my mouth? So Balak takes him to another field to show him another part of the Israelites. So let's try this again. Let's see if we can do this again. I mean, you got to give Balak credit for believing that God's blessing matters, right? I mean, you got to give him credit because he's trying here. Balaam builds 7 more altars, 7 more bulls, 7 more rams, sacrifices. Same result. He comes back and he tells Balak, same thing. Israel's still blessed, and I'm not going to curse them. And Balak is like, just stop. Stop saying these blessings on my enemies. Quit it. But let's do it again. So he takes him to another place for a 3rd time. And he goes, same drill, 7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams, does it all again. Balak is getting desperate. And we get a little bit of a difference here in Numbers 24. This time, this 3rd time, it takes a turn. Numbers 24, verse 1. When Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped, tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came on him. That's not happened yet before. Remember last week we talked about reading the details. That's an important detail. The Spirit of God came on him, and he proclaimed his poem, his oracle. And he's proclaiming this, and he's more blessing for Israel, more curse on Moab. And Balak just loses his mind and tells Balaam, just go home. I'm not paying you. Before he leaves, Balaam gives his 4th poem. He gives him a bonus. Read this one, verse 15 of Numbers 24. The oracle of Balaam, son of Beor. The oracle of the man whose eyes are opened. The oracle of one who hears the sayings of God and has knowledge from the Most High, who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls into a trance with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I perceive him, but not near. A star will come from Jacob, and a scepter will arise from Israel. And he will smash the forehead of Moab and strike down all the Sethites. So the Spirit of God comes on Balaam, and he makes a direct prophecy of the coming Messiah. One who is not here now, who's coming. One who will rule with a scepter and be as glorious as a star. By the way, Revelation 2, talking about Jesus, that prophecy is kind of repeated. Revelation 2 says he will rule them with an iron scepter, and he will shatter them like pottery. So the Spirit of God coming on Balaam gives him this messianic prophecy. Here's a little reminder. Jesus is the thread woven throughout the entire Old Testament. The Old Testament's not just a bunch of little random stories here and there, and all that kind of matters, but doesn't really, because then Jesus. Okay? Jesus is God's plan from the very beginning, revealed to us once we get to the New Testament fully. So Balaam has spoken his 4th poem. He then goes on to speak 3 more, which makes how many? 7. And then he goes home. You know, it would be pretty awesome if, like to think that, okay, from now on, Balaam gets it, right? Like this was life-changing for him. It would be nice to think that, but it's not true. The very next chapter, we see the Israelites of Numbers. We see the Israelites beginning to worship Baal, the false god, and beginning to prostitute themselves with these surrounding countries' women. And God sends a plague on them. 24,000 men die out of Israel. But what does that have to do with Balaam? Because it seems like Balaam's story is over. You got to look to the New Testament to put some pieces together. Balaam appears 3 times in the New Testament. He's referred to 3 times in the New Testament. 2 Peter 2 tells us that Balaam loved the wages of wickedness. Jude 1 talks about Balaam's error for profit. But Revelation 2, verse 14 says, "But I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to place a stumbling block in front of the Israelites, to eat meat sacrificed to idols and to commit sexual immorality." Wow. So apparently Balaam couldn't curse Israel straight up. So he hatched a plan to get Israel to curse themselves. And then he went and he taught this to Balak, who apparently paid him for the knowledge. And Balaam walked this road of temptation that caused him to sell out God's people. Wow. And he becomes this prime example of failure in the Old Testament. What do I want us to walk away with today? Other than an interesting story that you may not have heard very often, if at all. I want you to walk away with this. Keep your heart soft. Always keep your heart soft. You do that by reading the Word, by praying, by being in fellowship with people. Keep your heart soft. Keep your ears open. Okay? Be listening actively for God, for his voice. Surround yourself with godly people. Don't become isolated and think you can do this thing on your own. You can't. None of us can. Surround yourself with godly people. Put yourself in position to have experiences where you're having opportunity for growth. And then keep ungodly people and behaviors away. Don't let these temptations even in your house. Don't invite this temptation that you have. Don't invite it over to stay the night. Keep it away. And that'll help you stand in the face of temptation. And you're following God's road. And you're following God's road only. And you say, this is what my life will be. I don't care if you're 10 years old or 80 years old. When you say, this is my life, this is where I'm going to be, do not allow temptation to push you a fraction of an inch off that road. The road is straight. It is true. It is the best, God's best for you. And he wants you so desperately to walk that road and to avoid being tempted to walk any other road. Let's bow together. What's God showing you today? What's he showing you? What's he wanting you to hear? Did you have a conversation with the Spirit of God who lives in you? Did you talk with him? Did you confess anything? I mean, if you know that you've stepped off the road this week and it's pretty clear, would you confess that and push and ask him to pull you back onto his road? Maybe it's an overt sin that you know is just wrong. you need to confess that. You need to make that right. And ask him to forgive you and fill you once again. Maybe what you're struggling with is not so overt. Maybe it's a tendency to lose heart, tendency to question too often, tendency to go your own way, tendency to think that you know better than God, a tendency to harden your heart and allow your ears and to become callous to his voice. Those are the things that you need to confess, because those are sin as well. Let's call it what it is. I believe that God wants to restore you to fullness today. And if you are not walking in fullness, you do not walk in this room walking in fullness with God. You can walk out of this room in fullness with God. But it's you making the choice to let him. Would you talk with God right now? Take care of whatever business is between you. Lord, have your way in this place right now. Spirit, move throughout this room, throughout our hearts, and teach us, grow us, change us.